You can build this piece of terrain with player-controlled moving platforms for under $20 in just a couple of hours. And you can make all these minis for just a few dollars. I'm going to go over how to build this arena, as well as some general tips for making paper minis and terrain, like different places to get the art, best types of paper and print methods to use, how to make these durable and reusable terrain tiles, and some extra tips for getting the best result, including this Sharpie tip that really elevates the look of the minis. I'm also going to show you a really easy way to increase immersion at your table with the art from the sponsor of today's video, James RPG Art. Welcome to the table. I'm Kelly, and if you've been following the channel, then you know I've been having some problems in the D&D room lately. So I decided to run an epic one-shot for my group to reignite the spark and give my players a climax they'll remember. A climactic battle. The battle will be the climax. There won't be any other climaxes. Anyways, I wanted to create a really cool piece of terrain, but I also wanted to spend as little as possible, because I'm trying to be story daddy, not sugar daddy. I'm really happy with how this thing turned out, and it didn't take that long to make. I'm gonna go through the one-shot I've created, and we'll make the terrain and minis for each encounter as we go. I wanted this one-shot to be fun and lighthearted with the vibe of a casual board game night. I've put in a bunch of different types of encounters, including a heist, puzzles, some carnival minigames, and a big arena battle at the end on this terrain with magic item loot crates and moving platforms. The premise of the one-shot is that the party of adventurers has gained some notoriety, and they have the opportunity to join the most prestigious and mysterious adventurers guild in the world. But only if they can pass the trials. I know, the story is nothing original, but it's a really easy structure that allows me to put in a whole bunch of different challenges without worrying about justifying them. The one-shot is going to be in two parts. For the first half, they'll need to collect 3 pieces of a magical teleportation device. Once they assemble it and solve the puzzles, they'll be teleported to the arena for the second half, which is the big combat. The 3 challenges in the first half can be completed in any order, but the order that the players choose will affect the encounter. The first challenge is to steal a magic item from a wagon being guarded by mercenaries. This wagon starts outside the city in the forest, then it passes through the gates, then it moves to its destination at a noble's house. If the players choose to do this challenge first, then the wagon will start in the forest and they can choose where to ambush it. If they do it second, it starts at the city gates, and if they do it last, it'll be at the noble's house being unloaded. Let's make some minis and terrain for this first encounter. In order to be flexible with this encounter, and to keep in my DM kit for future encounters, I wanted to make some reusable terrain tiles. Let's start with the art. Where do you get art for paper minis and terrain? Everything in this video is from Printable Heroes, but there are other great sources as well. I chose to use Printable Heroes because the website is super easy to use, which is really handy when you're searching for specific minis. The PDF creator they have also means you can save money by packing the minis onto the page. But we'll get to that. I came across this list from Jack Edwards of a bunch of different paper, terrain, and mini makers, and I've linked the article down in the description. If we head to the Printable Heroes website and we search map, that will show us all the map tiles that are available. Printable Heroes has a ton of stuff for free, and then they have different versions available at higher tiers. For these terrain tiles, I'm going to put dungeon tiles on one side and wilderness on the other. To make these double-sided, we'll just need to center the image on both pages. If you have something like Adobe Illustrator or the free alternative Inkscape, then this is pretty simple. Just drag them on and snap them to the center. Then you can export the document as a PDF. There are some tolerances in printers, so depending on your print shop, they may not be able to get the alignment perfect, but mine came out great. These are printed double-sided on 100-pound cardstock, and then I got them laminated in 5mm and 10mm lamination to compare. 10mm lamination is a bit more expensive per page, and I don't think it gave enough of a difference to be worth it, so 5mm is good enough. But why laminate at all? I found that with big terrain pieces, the paper curled a bit. The lamination makes them stay more flat, and it also protects them against scratches. Now just take a ruler and a utility knife and cut out the terrain. I made a few different 8x8 ones and some 5x5s. I can use the wilderness side if my players do the heist in the forest, and the dungeon side if they do the heist in the city. Now before we make some minis for these mercenaries, I want to show you what I'm going to use to extend this terrain, and what I'm going to use for the encounters that don't need terrain with the sponsor of today's video, James RPG Art. James makes beautiful pieces of art that you can use as backgrounds to supplement your D&D terrain, like I'm going to do with the forest encounter, or to use instead of maps and terrain for encounters that don't need them. One of the encounters in this one-shot is a Carnival Games encounter that doesn't need a map, so I'm going to use this piece to set the scene and immerse my players. James has a website that's connected to the Patreon, so you can easily browse and find exactly what you're looking for. There are pieces for pretty much any setting you might find yourself in while adventuring, as well as pieces for popular pre-written campaigns like Curse of Strahd. Most pieces have alternate versions like nighttime or even animated versions, which are available at higher tiers. James is also partnered with map makers so that every new piece comes included with an encounter map. Go check out the James RPG website and Patreon at the links down in the description and take your player immersion to the next level. Alright, let's make some minis. But what kind of paper should we get these printed on? I tested a bunch of different types of paper to see which works best. These are printed double-sided on 270 GSM cardstock, which is 100-pound cardstock. I tested a bunch of different types of paper to see which works best. Printable Heroes recommends glossy for best colors and contrast, but there are a lot of reflections and they showed fingerprints. I also tried matte paper, but it was susceptible to bending when glued and the colors weren't as nice. So just like that no good porridge thief Goldilocks, I prefer the middle ground, which is semi-gloss, also called silk. As for thickness, Printable Heroes recommends 200 GSM paper for standard minis and 250 GSM for larger minis. I tested regular printer paper, 170 GSM paper, 215 GSM, and 270 GSM. The regular printer paper, unsurprisingly, didn't work at all. The 270 is a bit more difficult to fold and cut because it's so thick, but the result has so much structure that if you're trying to make some minis you can keep on using, I'd recommend going with the 270 so it lasts. I joined the Printable Heroes Patreon so I could get access to the PDF creator. This tool makes it so easy to find and organize exactly the minis you need. It also allows you to maximize the space on your paper and save money by printing more minis on one sheet. You can either use the search function on the home page and then add the ones that you want to the page by clicking Add to Page, or you can open the PDF creator and then search for minis right within a page. My print shop's printers need a 1/8 inch or 3.175mm margin. After you add some minis to the page, you can hit this pack button and it'll attempt to automatically arrange your minis on the page. This is hit and miss, but I usually do this to get it close and then move them by hand to pack as many in as possible. If it can't automatically fit all your minis on the page, it'll turn yellow and then just spin forever. So if it's not doing anything, just hit the button again and then arrange by hand. Printable Heroes offers two methods for making minis, but one looks way better and is absolutely worth the extra work. The easy method is to disable the show silhouette option and print them on a white background. Then just cut out the rectangle, fold along these lines, and then add a bit of glue to the bottom. This is the fastest and easiest method, and it's what I did when I first started using these a few years ago. It looks okay. Or you can enable the show silhouette option, cut around the shape, and then you have a way better looking mini, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we need to send these to the print shop. Once you have all your minis organized on the page, you can hit print and then print as PDF. A quick money saving tip, if you have a program that can combine PDFs, combine them all into one file. Most print shops charge a file handling fee, so if you put everything you need into one PDF, they'll probably only charge you one fee. You can also save money by slightly overlapping the minis. As long as the silhouettes don't touch, you can make the boxes overlap since we'll be cutting around that anyways. Now comes the time-consuming part, so pop in some headphones, put on your favorite D&D podcast, and let's do some cutting. You're gonna need a few tools for this part. I got most of these at the dollar store for $1 or $2 each. You'll need a utility knife, a metal ruler, a cutting map, you can get a much smaller and cheaper one than I have, some glue sticks, and a craft knife. This one was $2 from the dollar store, and it works great. First, we'll roughly cut out the minis using the utility knife. Quick warning here, sharp knives are sharp, so yeah. After roughly cutting out the mini, fold it using the center line, making it as even as possible. Add some glue to both sides, then press down. Now for the finicky part. Cutting with a craft knife takes practice, so I'd recommend getting a few extra minis printed to practice on. Other than never putting your fingers in the knife's path, the biggest tips I can give you are, number 1, hold it like a pen, and number 2, in order to change directions, you need to rotate the craft knife. To make a swooping arc, for example, slowly rotate the knife as you're cutting. I also found that it looks much better if you make smooth cuts that don't precisely follow the shape of the character. Now we have a little mini, but they need to stand up. You can use the paper base by folding out these tabs and then gluing them onto the cutout base. But I find this makes them easy to knock over because they're so light, and also makes them hard to store because you can't stack them on top of each other. Until now, I've been using binder clips, which works really well. To use these with a binder clip, glue the two tabs together and put the minis in a binder clip. Then take off the little silver handles. This provides a really cheap base that also adds some weight. When you're done, you can just pull the mini out of the binder clip and store it flat. Recently, I found these little plastic bases on Amazon that are used for game cards and place setting cards. Unfortunately, the gap is too big. You might be able to make them work by adding some tape to your minis, but once I saw those, I figured it would be really easy to 3D print some bases, and that would be even cheaper. To use the plastic bases, you have to cut off the little paper tabs and then just slot them into the base. I'm using these for all my walls and props as well. If you want to print these bases yourself, the 3D print file is linked down in the description. There's only one final step to do, and it was the absolute best tip I came across. JP Creations has a really great in-depth video on making these minis, which I've linked down in the description. In that video, JP goes over the edges with a black Sharpie, and it makes the minis look so much better. I think it instantly makes them look more premium. Now just repeat, and we have our mercenaries, wagon, horse, and trees. As I mentioned in a previous video, when I started using these, I thought quantity was better, so I printed a whole bunch and tried to make a big collection right off the bat. But then I didn't end up using half of them. I'd recommend just printing what you need for a specific encounter, and maybe even just the most important monsters in that encounter. Then you can slowly build your collection as you need them. I made these number tokens you can print and use for less important enemies, or improvised encounters that you don't have minis for. Having numbers on them makes it easy to keep track of which generic token belongs to which monster in your combat tracker. If you don't want to make your own, these tokens are available on my Patreon. Okay, back to our one-shot. The other two challenges don't require any minis. The first is to retrieve a piece of the magic item that has been suspended from the top of a guard tower. Sometimes I like to throw a challenge out like this, where it's just cross this canyon or get a MacGuffin from the top of this tower. It's a short encounter that allows your players to be creative, and sometimes leads to funny moments if someone fails a climb check and takes some fall damage. These little challenges are a good way to make a session feel more full without adding a ton of time. The third encounter isn't a D&D encounter at all, but I thought it'd be fun to break up the D&D with some party games to get everyone moving and give them something a little different before going into a longer and more complicated combat in the second half of the one-shot. The challenge is that they have to win some carnival games in character, but instead of rolling checks, they're gonna actually play some dexterity games. There's a game where they'll need to shoot dice into a cup, a game where they need to slide coins across the table but not off the edge, and a challenge where they can attempt to drink a full can of fizzy water without burping. They need to complete the challenges to get the final piece of the teleportation item. If you want the full one-shot, including all the encounters, puzzles, and the mechanics for the terrain platforms, it's available on my Patreon, which is linked down below, along with another one-shot, a persuasion minigame, modular magic items, and a bunch of other stuff. Speaking of the terrain, before I show you how easy it was to build, let's look at the finished product. This combat encounter is a horde mode survival encounter. Players need to survive 10 rounds of combat with new monsters being added each round. These platforms will move on their own on initiative 0. The players can also control a platform by going over to one of the orbs and using an object interaction. That'll keep the platform in their chosen position for one full round. Up here we have loot crates. Players can use an action to open the chest. Each time the chest is opened, they'll find something new inside. Some chests spawn magic items and weapons, while others spawn health potions. In-game, these crates and platforms are floating freely in the air, but IRL I have these skewers supporting them. The platforms use clothespins to slide up and down on the skewers. This encounter was inspired by 2 encounters from the latest season of Fantasy High on Dimension 20. The Last Stand exam battle and the finale battle. Once I actually figured out how to build this, it only took a couple of hours, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I made the base out of cardboard that I painted black, which was the cheapest option, but it would have been way easier to just buy a second piece of foam core from the dollar store, so that's what I'd recommend doing. By the way, if you found this helpful and want to see more budget terrain builds, hit that subscribe button to let me know. Here's what you'll need for the build. Either 2 pieces of 18-inch by 24-inch cardboard or black foam core. 8 barbecue skewers, 32 clothespins, a glue stick, a utility knife, a ruler, a cutting mat, and a craft knife. The first step is to print out 12 of these 5x5 dungeon tiles. I could fit 2 per page, so I only needed 6 sheets. I printed these at home because I had some photo paper, but the color definitely isn't as nice as the print shop. After cutting out the dungeon tiles, then we need to cut out 12 5-inch by 5-inch squares of foam core or cardboard. If you want, you can paint the edges of the foam core or cardboard black like I did. Now just glue the prints on. Next, we need to make the base for the skewers. Take the spring out of a clothespin, then tape it closed around the skewer. Now it should sit flat against the cardboard. We'll need 8 of these, 1 for each moving platform. The platforms where the entrances are won't be moving, so there will be 8 moving and 4 stationary platforms. Now we just need to cut a small slice into the center of each of the 8 moving platforms, then stick the skewers through. Now put a clothespin under the platform to hold it in place. As an optional step, we can also stick a paperclip through the platform and wrap it under the clothespin so that we have a handle to pull the platform from the top. For the stationary platforms, take apart 2 clothespins, tape them together on edge, repeat that a second time, then tape both pairs to the bottom of the platform. Now lay out all the platforms and start gluing. I laid them all out first to make sure they fit together nicely, then started gluing the bottoms one platform at a time using craft glue. For the walls, I used the 6x1 dungeon wall piece and then just trimmed 2 of them down to 5 inches. Because I'm not using the paper bases, I could overlap the walls and fit 2 per page. For the doorways, I used this dungeon door and then just left the silhouette in the middle to make it seem like there's an endless void outside of this arena. One tip for the chests, I found it easiest to fold the paper, cut out the chest, then glue the 2 halves onto the skewer instead of gluing first and then cutting. For the monsters for this encounter, I decided to use a bunch of monsters that I feel are iconic D&D monsters. I thought this would be a fun way to fight some iconic monsters that we might not have fought before, and to get some nostalgia by fighting some classics. And it also has the added benefit that most of these are available for free in the SRD, which fits in the budget for this cheap build. I'm so excited to run this for my group. If you build this and run it for your group, let me know how it goes down in the comments. Are you looking for some more budget-friendly ways to play D&D? Check out this video here for 7 free D&D tools I use in every single session. I appreciate you.